Robert Louis Stevenson, A Starry Drive, narrated by Howard King. In our rule at Silverado, there was a melancholy interregnum. The Queen and the Crown Prince, with one accord, fell sick. And as I was sick to begin with, our lone position on Mount Saint Helena was no longer tenable, and we had to hurry back to Calistoga and a cottage on the green. By that time we had begun to realize the difficulties of our position. We had found what an amount of labor it cost to support life in our Red Canyon, and it was the dearest desire of our hearts to get a China boy to go along with us when we returned. We could have given him a whole house to himself, self-contained, as they say in the advertisements, and on the money question we were prepared to go far. Kong Sam Kee, the Calistoga washerman, was entrusted with the affair, and from day to day it languished on, with protestations on our part and mellifluous excuses on the part of Kong Sam Kee. At length, about 8:30 of our last evening, with the wagon ready harnessed to convey us up the grade, the washerman, with a somewhat sneering air, produced the boy. He was a handsome, gentlemanly lad, attired in rich dark blue, and shod with snowy white, but, alas, he had heard rumors of Silverado. He knew it for a lone place on the mountainside, with no friendly wash-house nearby where he might smoke a pipe of opium o' nights with other China boys, and lose his little earnings at the game of tan. And he first begged out for more money, and then, when that demand was satisfied, refused to come point blank. He was wedded to his wash-houses. He had no taste for the rural life, and must go to our mountains servantless. It must have been near half an hour before we reached that conclusion, standing in the midst of Calistoga High Street under the stars, and the China boy and Kong Sam Kee singing their pidgin English in sweetest voices and with the most musical inflections. We were not, however, to return alone, for we brought with us Joe Strong, the painter, a most good-natured comrade, and a capital hand at an omelette. I do not know in which capacity he was most valued, as a cook or a companion, and he did excellently well in both. The Kong Sam Kee negotiation had delayed us unduly. It must have been 9:30 before we left Calistoga, and night came fully ere we struck the bottom of the grade. I've never seen such a night. It seemed to throw calumny in the teeth of all the painters that ever dabbled in starlight. The sky itself was a ruddy, powerful, nameless, changing color, dark and glossy, like a serpent's back. The stars, by innumerable millions, stuck boldly forth like lamps. The Milky Way was bright, like a moonlit cloud. Half heaven seemed Milky Way. The greater luminaries shone each more clearly than a winter's moon. Their light was dyed in every sort of color, red like fire, blue like steel, green like the tracks of sunset, and so sharply did each stand forth in its own luster that there was no appearance of that flat, star-spangled arc we know so well in pictures, but all of the hollow of heaven was one chaos of contesting luminaries, a hurly-burly of stars. Against this the hills and rugged tree-tops stood out redly dark. As we continued to advance, the lesser lights and Milky Ways first grew pale and then vanished. The countless hosts of heaven dwindled in number by successive millions. Those that still shone had tempered their exceeding brightness and fallen back into their customary wistful distance. And the sky declined from its first bewildering splendor into the appearance of a common night. Slowly this change proceeded, and still there was no sign of any cause. Then a whiteness like mist was thrown over the spurs of the mountain. Yet a while, and as we turned a corner, a great leap of silver light and net of forest shadows fell across the road and upon our wandering wagonful. And swimming low among the trees, we beheld a strange misshapen waning moon, half tilted on her back. "Where are ye when the moon appears?" So the old poet sang, half taunting to the stars, bent upon a courtly purpose. As the sunlight round the dim earth's midnight tower of shadow pours, streaming past the dim white portals, viewless to the eyes of mortals, till it floods the moon's pale islet o'er the morning's golden shores. So sings Mr. Trowbridge with a noble inspiration, and so had the sunlight flooded that pale islet of the moon, and her lit face put out, one after another, that galaxy of stars. The wonder of the drive was over, but by some nice conjunction of clearness in the air and fit shadow in the valley where we traveled, we had seen for a little while that brave display of the midnight heavens. It was gone, but it had been. Nor shall I ever again behold the stars with the same mind. He who has seen the sea commoved with a great hurricane thinks of it very differently from him who has seen it only in a calm. And the difference between a calm and a hurricane is not greatly more striking than that between the ordinary face of night and the splendor that shone upon us in that drive. Two in our wagon knew night as she shines upon the tropics, but even that bore no comparison. The nameless color of the sky, the hues of the starfire, and the incredible projection of the stars themselves, starting from their orbits, so that the eye seemed to distinguish their positions in the hollow of space, these were things that we had never seen before, and shall never see again. Meanwhile, in this altered night, we proceeded on our way among the scents and silence of the forest, reached the top of the grade, wound up by Hanson's, and came at last to a stand under the flying gargoyle of the chute. Sam, who had been lying back, fast asleep, with the moon on his face, got down, with the remark that it was pleasant to be home. The wagon turned and drove away, the noise gently dying in the woods, and we clambered up the rough path, Caliban's great feat of engineering, and came home to Silverado. The moon shone in at the eastern doors and windows, and over the lumber of the platform. The one tall pine beside the ledge was steeped in silver. Away up the canyon, a wild cat welcomed us with 3 discordant squalls. But once we had lit a candle and began to review our improvements, homely in either sense, and count our stores, it was wonderful what a feeling of possession and permanence grew up in the hearts of the lords of Silverado. A bed had still to be made up for strong, and the morning's water to be fetched with clinking pail. And as we set about these household duties, and showed off our wealth and conveniences before the stranger, and had a glass of wine, I think, in honor of our return, and trooped at length, one after another, up the flying bridge of plank, and lay down to sleep in our shattered, moon-pierced barrack, we were among the happiest sovereigns in the world, and certainly ruled over the most contented people. Yet, in our absence, the palace had been sacked. Wild cats, so the Hansons said, had broken in and carried off a side of bacon, a hatchet, and 2 knives.